Hi, I'm Lexi Sims, and this is my presentation over understanding students with ADHD. So, ADHD is an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder that usually occurs in children, but can also occur in adults. Um, so basically, the average age of diagnosis is 7, and most symptoms are seen between the ages of 3 and 6. So I found a lot of different numbers for this, but the site that I decided to go with said that in 2018, 6.4 million of US children ages 4 to 17 were diagnosed with ADHD. So 6.4 million is a pretty good chunk of the kids that you see in the elementary schools, in the middle schools, and in the high schools. So increases of ADHD. ADHD has definitely increased over the years. So in the past 8 years, it's increased 42%, and 6.1 of American children are being treated for ADHD. So if you think about it's increased by 42%, but only 6.1% are being treated for it. It kind of makes you wonder why only 6.1 are being treated for it, or the kinds of things that go through a parent's mind about if they want to treat their child or not. Many times, if a child is treated, they have a very different personality, and their personality becomes a lot more dry, and they become a lot more quiet, which is treating parts of their ADHD, because ADHD does cause children to bounce off the walls a little bit, or always need to move, or always need to be playing with something. They always can't, or they can talk a lot, things like that. A couple of these statistics, this one and this one, were just kind of caught my eye. So children in households where English is the main language and their first language are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than a child living in a household where English is not their first language, where it is their second or third language. Kentucky, Arkansas, Louisiana, Indiana, Delaware, and South Carolina also have the highest rates of ADHD. So those are all kind of in a similar area. So you kind of wonder what causes that. So contributions to increase these numbers, basically what it comes down to is they're just doing more tests, and they have better technology to be able to do these tests and do different types of tests. It's also better access to healthcare insurance, as well as mental health treatment through the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. Another thing about that is as time goes on, I read an article about how a doctor thinks that they are overdiagnosing children with this, because just because a child shows symptoms of ADHD, that child just may be very active or very outgoing, as well as bounce off the walls. It might not be ADHD. Just because they can't focus in class might just mean that they have a lot of energy, or they had a sugary cereal for breakfast, something along those lines. It doesn't always go back to having to be diagnosed with something. Sometimes it's just something else. It's not necessarily ADHD. So symptoms of ADHD: trouble concentrating or focusing, difficulty staying organized, forgetful, difficulty sitting still, acting out, hyperactivity, lack of focus. These are all things that are commonly seen in the elementary classroom. As kids grow up, I don't feel like they're as commonly seen in like the high school, but they definitely are still seen. And the age range where ADHD is most likely or most commonly recognized is ages 3 to 6. So if you see these symptoms, you need to kind of be getting a plan, or continue to recognize these as time goes on, to be able to help out that child and know kind of where to go with your lesson plans, or how you can work with them in class. So coexisting conditions: learning disabilities, anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar disorder, Tourette's, substance abuse, bedwetting problems, sleep disorders. Just because a kid shows a learning disability, though, does not mean that they have ADHD. Just because a kid has depression does not mean that they have ADHD. These are just things that can go hand in hand and often do go hand in hand with ADHD. And being able to see that a child is dealing with this might help be able to work with them, just as being able to recognize ADHD will help you work with them. So ADHD in girls is a lot different than ADHD in boys. They show different symptoms. So being withdrawn, low self-esteem, anxiety, impairment in attention, inattentiveness, daydreaming, verbal aggression, bullying, putting others down, calling other girls names, things such as that may be a sign of ADHD, but it could also just be how they are. So ADHD also in girls, just because these take place in girls does not mean that they can't take place in boys. Boys can daydream just as a girl can. So these are just more commonly found in girls. So IDEA of 2004 basically says that ADHD is covered under the other health impairment portion of it. So if the child has attention issues and meets the laws, standards for qualifying disability, and if the disability affects educational performance, then that's when steps may be taken to begin the IEP process. If the school evaluation team agrees that these attention issues are impacting the ability to learn, then they can take the first steps towards an IEP or a 504. That's another option that I didn't put up here. A 504 is another direction they could go in. ADHD is also covered in the category of, like I said, other health impairment. So meeting these standards can qualify them. But it's kind of a hard, it's kind of a difficult position to be in, because just because a kid has ADHD doesn't mean they're necessarily qualified to be under an IEP. It just, like I said, they have to meet these certain qualifications. So interventions that can be used throughout the classroom, and not only with kids with ADHD, but also with children with just about any other learning disability, or even a regular student would do well with these. So task duration, making sure that they know the task at hand and the steps leading up to it. Direct instruction, so whether that be you telling the whole class and then going to a select few students and being like, okay, this is, start with this, do this. One of the things that we looked at in class one day was using a task card, and basically like each direction. So here's step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. Make sure you go through all of these. Peer tutoring, have a child who is done with their homework, who knows what's going on, help them and have them learn from their peers rather than another teacher. It might help them, and the student might say something that the teacher didn't even think about saying. Scheduling, have the schedule on the board, have it have the day planned out where the students can see it, where they can write it out in their planners, where they know what's going to be happening, where they know what you're going to be learning that day. Structure and organization, have the desks in a way that works with your class. Have the desk layout designed to your class, not how it works best with the room. Have different folders and different creative flows going. So like have collaboration desks, collaboration centers, stuff like that. Rule reminders and visual cues, have not only for the classroom but also for the hallways, as well as auditory cues, so as speaking it as well as them being able to see it. pace of work, so make sure you're not going too fast, and if they're not picking up on it, maybe you do need to slow down. Instructions, like I said, task duration kind of goes with that. And then productive physical movement. Kids need to move around. They need to be exploring. They need to have things in their hands. They need to get out energy. They have a lot of energy, and you don't know like what they're going to be going home to. So get just make sure that they can move around. It stimulates the brain. So get them moving, having fun in class, and they'll learn alongside. And then my citations. So thank you. I don't know how to